Good morning. I'm Mr. Kendrick, and this is our first virtue lesson in integrity. Virtues are solid habits that we practice day in and day out until it can become a new second nature, something that you do without even thinking. So I'm actually going to move myself over here. Okay, so I'm going to start out with a few biblical verses, and then I'll explain a little bit about how they deal with the virtue of integrity. So you are the light of the world. A town on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. One of the reasons I picked this quotation is that this is about your identity. This is about confidence. This is about being able to be light, to be seen. This is our given identity here. And, you're not supposed to hide that. You are supposed to show it. And it kind of goes through it with, we show it through our good deeds, through our habits. And integrity is really closely linked to confidence in our identity. And this is really cool. The next quote is also from the Sermon on the Mount. Actually, both of these are from the Sermon on the Mount. And again, you have heard it said to people long ago, do not break your oath, but fulfill to the Lord the vows you have made. But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, or for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make even one hair white or black. All you need to say is simply yes or no. Anything beyond this is from the evil one. And here we see this great importance on your words, that the people in the kingdom of God should be people for whom just saying yes or saying no is sufficient. That our words should have weight enough that if we say it, it should happen. And this kind of combined focus in the Sermon on the Mount from Jesus is a lot of what we're going to be looking at in integrity. So outside of morality, the word integrity is often used in construction. And something has good integrity if it's solid, if it's going to stay firm through wear and tear and can withstand the elements for a really long time. The example I have here is the construction of Chinese palaces. And I saw something really interesting a few years ago where they did all these earthquake tests to these really ancient Chinese buildings. And because of the way they did the interlocking wood throughout, that there's enough flexibility in the structure that it can withstand an incredibly strong earthquake. In fact, like the whole thing was shaking really, really hard, and the building was moving, but was staying solid. And so this is a building these are buildings that have stood the test of time, and they have really solid construction. And so I love this connection because it's helpful when we consider integrity within morality. Integrity is a virtue where we work on ourselves to become more solid, reliable, and strong. A lot of people at the beginning of the course, when they talked about morality, one of the things that they brought up was the importance of self-care. And working on integrity is a key virtue of self-care. And so I'm going to define the virtue for our purposes in the class. So integrity is the practice of unity in heart, mind, word, and action. And it's expressed through honesty with yourself and with others. And if you're wondering, wait, how can you lie to yourself? We'll talk about that a little bit later. And excellence in this practice will produce confidence. If you're unified, if your heart, what you're driving towards, is united with what you're thinking, and is reflected in your words and your actions, you're going to be rightly confident, and you're going to have appropriate power and authority that comes with that unity and that honesty. That when you say you're going to do something, they'll be like, okay, we don't need to worry about that because that person has integrity. Or this person said that thing to me, and I know that that has weight because this person has integrity. This is what I mean by appropriate power and authority, as well as confidence. So if you're wondering where's a good place to start in order to build this virtue, a really solid place to start is with your words. If you actually look at the book of Proverbs and the book of James in the Bible, these are wisdom books that focus a lot on integrity, and a lot of what they focus on is words. And this is likely because words often reveal the heart and the mind, and they're the main vehicle for honesty. And perhaps the first step to working on integrity is to develop a high value for your words. And if you don't already place high value on your words, especially in simple, non-high stakes situations, it may be helpful to look at your community and the narrative you believe regarding words. And because by looking at the fruit, if you look for people around you who you value their opinion, you value their advice, if they say they're going to do something, you know they're going to do it, look at them and see, okay, this is the fruit of integrity, that confidence, that appropriate authority, and see if they're putting in this work by placing a high value on their own words. And if you see that, perhaps you can see that narrative and value your own words. And the reason I say this rather than just like, remember to value your words, is that if we can connect something we value intellectually with a story in our hearts, there's more likelihood that we will do it in reality. For my students, this is a train the elephant moment. If you don't value your words, find a narrative that you can get behind with your heart. Don't be disingenuous, but think like, this is what I want. Who is doing this, and how can I get behind that? Okay. So the next thing to focus on is what leads you. And so when we are working towards unity in our heart, our mind, our words, our actions, one thing will often lead the others. And it's important to be aware of what leads you. And what I mean by leading is, okay, so maybe I think this, and then do my heart and my words and my actions follow from that? Or does something else lead? Does something else start the process that leads the others to come into unity? Now, many people struggle with integrity in words because they let their feelings or their emotions guide their words and their actions. And interestingly, when I talk about heart, I'm not talking about your emotional feelings. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But the reason why feelings don't support integrity is because feelings come and go. Even in the things that you really love, feelings come and go. Whether it be people, some days you're just not going to be like into it. You'll be tired. You'll be frustrated. You'll be sad. Sometimes you'll be like, oh my goodness, this is so great. And then like a few days later, you'll be like, eh. And that's life. And we need to be able to practice integrity with that. Kind of like the interlocking Chinese palaces. It's not like we should pretend that earthquakes can't exist. It's that we should look at our integrity in light of the waves that come with feelings. And so, yeah, if I say I'm going to go to this event when I'm feeling really joyful and really excited, but then when it comes to it, I feel tired and not going, and I just assume that they're going to understand, that doesn't support honesty or unity of the self. And so that's important. It is important to acknowledge and respect our feelings so we don't just stuff them down. That's kind of ignoring that earthquakes exist. But it's unhelpful to allow your feelings to lead. And so words can either reflect the heart or the mind, as I said before, and they can lead the heart, the mind, and the action. And so if I have a strong value on my words and I say I'm going to do something, I increase the accountability and am more likely to do it, which will support unity and honesty. I'll tell a quick story that happened just the other week. So I play tennis here with Mr. Larson, he's an English teacher here, and Mr. Krantz, also an English teacher here. And sometimes during the summer, we forgot to bring new balls. And I'm also the assistant girls tennis coach, and so I have access to the shed. And there are literally just things of new balls all throughout. And sometimes we forget to bring the balls, and so it doesn't really make sense to drive all the way to a sports store and drive back just to bring balls. And so last week I took 2 things of balls, and when Mr. Larson came out, I was like, I'm telling you that I took these 2 from the shed, and I'm going to count the number, and then when the season begins, when we're going to need these balls for match days, I'm going to replace them. So I'm taking 2 now. And he's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And the reason I told him is not because I think I'm going to cheat the system and be like, oh, I'm a coach, I deserve this perk, I deserve free new balls. No. The reason I told him is because I know that my feelings might not always line up. And also my mind might not always line up. I might forget. I might be lazy. In fact, part of the reason I'm doing this is because I forgot and I was lazy. And so saying this to him increases the accountability. Now, interestingly, we didn't use those balls because he had bought new balls that day. So it ended up being moot so far. But this is an example of how you can use your words to increase accountability, both with yourself and with others. So I want to go through another example to show the effect of choosing to lead with your feelings or your words. So when I was in college, I worked for a company that built fences. And I'll get into this a little bit later, but my boss had 2 rules. He said that there are 2 ways that you can be fired. He put it in the negative, which was sometimes more helpful. And that he said that you're expected to give 100% all the time and never lie. If you're giving 100% and you tell the truth to me about everything, that then you're fine. I will back you all the time. And so we would start work at 7 a.m. and oftentimes we would work just until until the jobs were basically finished for the day. And so we would often, if you finish around 3:30, that's about the time when he might not send you out on a job. But if you finished decently after 4, you generally wouldn't be sent out on a new job. But every once in a while, you might be out on a job site and it's 6:30 at night, so you've almost worked 12 hours that day, and you just cleaned up the site, you packed up the truck, and you're about ready to head out on the road, and then the boss calls you, and he says oh, did you remember to fill in the holes that we're not doing yet because the client asked us to fill those in just for now? And you might think oh man, I forgot. And so your feeling is I'm tired. And in your mind, you might be thinking well, this is in the middle of nowhere. No one's going to come out here. And you might think this doesn't really matter if it gets done right now because I just packed up the truck. It's late. I can do it first thing tomorrow morning. And so there's a question. So what am I going to say? And I can let my words lead me, or I could let my actions lead me, or I could let my feelings lead me. And so I could say yeah, I took care of it, and then rush to try and get it done the next morning. But I don't know, one, that's lying because I didn't take care of it. And 2, within the fabric that he built his company, if the client says you said, did you guys take care of that? And we say yes, and he goes out and checks, I'm done. I'm fired. And that's not the reason why people should be in integrity. It should be out of self-care and high value of the self and high value of truth. But, I could say, you know what, I forgot. I'm on it right now. And that's not lying. To be okay, I'm on it. Obviously I'm tired, I'm frustrated, but you could allow your words to lead to create that action, and kind of fill in the heart and the mind as well. Or you could even say, you know what, I forgot, I apologize. Can I do this first thing in the morning because I just packed up the truck? Both of those would be in integrity, but saying like I took care of it and then trying to rush in the next morning really early to fix it would not be. Okay. So I already talked a little bit about this, but you can also allow rules to lead you. That one of the things that should happen in integrity is you should put weight on rules and the rules that you've assented to, whether implicitly or explicitly, because this can form you in integrity. So if you are part of a community then that has rules, you honor them because you have decided to be a part of this. So you honor your action with this follow through. And this is important because if a rule is harmful, you should process a response in integrity. And this could be a verbal response. This could be an actionable response. This could be knowingly breaking a rule in some sort of protest. And that's not necessarily out of step with integrity. Now, because if you're in a community that you've implicitly or explicitly agreed to the rules, then you must accept the consequences of it as part of that integrity. And perhaps as part of that work of the protest, that's saying like, well, this should never be in place, so I shouldn't be punished. That's a good reason, but it's not necessarily in integrity. So I already told you the two rules for integrity at my job, always give 100% and never lie. And I found that really helpful, and he said, like, give me bad news immediately. Call me if you break a shovel. Call me if you lose an entire supply on the highway. Call me first. Don't hide and try to fix it, because the odds are who's going to find out is the client, the customer, and they're going to let me know, and then we can't fix it, because once the client sees a shoddy product, we've already lost. And we want to build things with great integrity. And so this was really built into my culture and my character throughout that time. And interestingly, a few years later, I was working for the Forest Service, and I was on one of those roads like this, where you can see like the grass is growing in the center. Now this would be years before I got to this kind of road, and so the things are coming in on the sides, and the trees are growing in the center. And I'm driving around at midnight on this really poorly maintained road with a Forest Service truck, and I'm going, and then suddenly I hear a boom, and I stop. I get out with my flashlight. I look around. I do see like a log that's like sticking out that they had cut, but I couldn't see in the thing. And I don't see any damage on the car. I'm just like, okay. And then I work the rest of my shift for 2 hours. Everything's fine. I put the car back in the shop and I go home. Next day I come into work, and my boss, who I rarely see because I start work at 4 p.m., he says anything weird happened last night? He did not mention the truck. And I said oh yeah, as I was driving up on the thing, all that stuff happened. And he's like, okay, that makes sense. And he says you're really lucky that you told the truth right there, because my bosses are looking for somebody to fry, because that thing actually caused thousands of dollars worth of damage, and the truck is pinched shut. The truck door is pinched shut in the back. And he said but you told me the truth, you didn't hide it, and so you're good. I'll cover it for you. And this isn't about it being primarily about selfishness. Being a person of integrity is good, but I didn't know necessarily that I would be protected. I didn't know that the good thing might come because I told the truth. And this is part of the key of integrity. So one question, so we started out with verses from the Sermon on the Mount, But one question is, where is God in the virtue of integrity? When we think about Catholic moral thought, a lot of what we've talked about is not necessarily Christian, and that's not a bad thing. And one of the questions is, where is God in this? And so if God exists, God either is truth or God is the author of truth. And so our experience of God in the midst of integrity often occurs when we encounter truth, and especially when we don't expect to. And it often starts with a question. And the question often is like, really? And it's coming internally, but not from ourselves. And I realize that's difficult and nuanced with an experience. And I'll tell just a brief story to illustrate this. So 10 years ago, I was applying to work in South Korea as an English teacher, and I needed a visa to work there. And so I needed to get my fingerprints done. And my parents happened to be living in central Louisiana. And, I hate lines. I really struggle a lot with bureaucracy. And so going to the police station to get my fingerprints done was just not something that I liked doing. And so I was like, I put it off to the very last minute. Then I went and I got there and, they take me in the back. And I also knew that fingerprints can take multiple days, maybe even weeks sometimes, as has been my experience after that. But we go in and the guy, the police officer takes me back into the back, and then we do the fingerprints. It's supposed to cost $15, and we actually have a really good conversation. I talk about why I'm going to Korea and what my plan is to do there and what I studied in college and things like that. And we had this really great conversation. And then afterwards, I've got my fingerprints. They just give them to me, and they even have an extra file that they're like, we'll send this one to them, and then you can keep this one, so that way you have them. And I was like, oh wow, this is great. This is way more than I was expecting. And then I go to pay, and then they're just like, bye. And I was like, oh my goodness, I don't even need to pay for this. This is so great. And as I'm leaving, if I'm thinking about it in integrity, which I wasn't explicitly then, my heart was like, this has been a great experience. And my mind was like, this has been so delightful. And my words and my actions, I told a lot of people about how great it was. And one of the things that came up later, so I'm completely in integrity. One of the things that came up later is why did I have such a great experience? Now, or more to the point, why was it free for me? And then the really was would it have been free for everyone who went in? And that was an unwelcome question to me. And it came to me within the next few weeks as I was telling the story of how great it was. Suddenly I was just like, maybe this wasn't so great in the sense that it would be great for everyone. And that's when I started to moderate it. Not that my experience, and that's the thing is that I believe that God was speaking a little bit about justice there, and it doesn't rob anything from the integrity of the experience, but it kind of shows that there can be deeper truths that are revealed through that kind of really? And this is important to consider as you're going forward, that it's not about I figure out what I'm supposed to do and then I never deviate from it. That we do need to be open to to God, to greater truths. And they're going to hit you. And one of the things, when we think about integrity is can we adapt? Can we move to work with them? Oh, here's the fingerprints thing. So one of the things that we're going to be doing is at the end of each virtue, there's going to be practices. And the practices are going to help you to improve and to help me improve. I'll say that all of these virtues are things that I am in the middle of practicing and want to become better at. And so we should be able to combine forces and work to better our integrity and other virtues together. And so the first thing, if you're struggling with unity of self and or honesty to improve, it would be to focus on commitments that you've made. That many people struggle with integrity because they overcommit in a desire to please others, or possibly that they struggle with laziness and they don't follow through. And so a good practice first, and this is kind of surprising perhaps, is to decrease the risk of accidentally lying by reducing your commitments. So don't just say you're going to do something if you don't know if you can. Practice saying like, no, I don't know. Can I get back to you? Instead of yes and then flaking out. And if you do say, can I get back to you? As part of integrity, you need to work on getting back to people. And this is important. This is a tough first thing, but really important. And then if you don't follow through on a commitment, make sure to apologize in person or on the phone if possible, not by text. And we're going to talk a little bit more about apologizing as part of building integrity later. Okay, so the next thing, and we've talked about this a little bit, is speech. Focus on your words. And one of the things that comes up a lot with speech is like, how can I be polite and also be in integrity? And one of the things I would say is that we should work on achieving both clarity and politeness. So clarity involves saying what you mean in an accurate way. And politeness involves showing care for another person. And sometimes clarity can offend people, and sometimes politeness can seem to rob clarity or honesty. So for instance, sometimes if a student is asking me like, oh, what's wrong with this? Like I'll try to like build a student up before I explain what's wrong with it. And sometimes that's not actually all that helpful to be like, just tell me what's wrong with it. So I am trying to be polite, but end up not being helpful with clarity. And so this is where it's an art that we should work on achieving both, because you can care for another person and be in integrity. And obviously clarity is really connected to honesty and integrity. As part of this, sometimes, and this is actually a huge one, is that you got to know when to stay silent. That integrity isn't saying everything that comes to your mind and be like, oh, I got to be in integrity. I got to speak my mind. I got to be honest. That you can stay silent. So if you're really feeling like saying something hurtful or unhelpful, you don't need to say it, and you also don't need to be fake. That you can say nothing. And kind of as part of that effective silence, don't pretend to know more about something than you do. This is a good practice to get into. A lot of people tend to like overinflate their knowledge of topics, and that will decrease your integrity both internally and in terms of like the weight that like the other people put on your words and actions. And we just have two more. One of them we've already done before, and this one is in some ways more for people in positions of authority like myself. That sometimes people can set up people to fail through not building a culture of integrity. So for instance, a question that teachers might ask, and that I have asked in the past, is like, are you doing your work when students are playing games or on their phones? And the thing is that I'm basically trapping someone into like, okay, the only reason I'm asking that question is because they're not doing it. And so and so in their minds, it's kind of like either I lie or I get in trouble. And these are both in small ways, but this decreases the value of integrity in the classroom. And so if I'm caring about my own integrity, I should care about other people's integrity. And so I shouldn't try to set people up to fail. And I shouldn't even accidentally set up people up to fail. And then kind of similarly with that if you ask a question, you need to respect the answer. And this is one of those classic, like, does this dress make me look fat type things, where don't ask questions you don't want to know the answer to as you're working on integrity. Because if you want people to just flatter you, or if you want people to just say nice things to you or say what you want to hear, you're not going to be increasing yours or the other person's integrity. And the last one, we've basically gone before, and this will be on your sheet, is to use rules and accountability with people that you trust to help you grow in issues regarding integrity. Thank you so much, and have a great